video moving pictures, I talk about how we got the first motion picture cameras. These cameras were first used to study animal movement, but they were quickly turned to the human form. Etienne Jules Marie, the inventor of the chronophotographic gun, the world's first motion picture camera, was the first person to shoot film footage of people. Marie was fascinated with how the human body worked. He started by studying blood circulation, then moved to analyzing heartbeats, respiration, muscles, and movement of the human body. He studied animals as well. He really wanted to understand exactly how everything moved. It was his intense desire to study physiology that spawned the motion picture industry. He had no idea at the time what his little invention would do to change the way we entertain ourselves. A silent film is a film with no synchronized sound. Basically, go watch your favorite movie and turn the volume all the way down. That's a silent film. You really need three things to have a silent film: a camera with a high enough shutter speed, a strip of film capable of taking multiple exposures quickly, and a way to project the developed images on screen. The oldest surviving silent film in existence is called Roundhay Garden Scene, and it was recorded by French inventor Louis Le Prince on October 14, 1888. The footage shows some people in the garden of Oakwood Grange in England. It has a runtime of only 2.11 seconds. It was shot at 12 frames per second, but a later digital remaster, which contains 52 frames, runs at 24.64 frames per second. The camera that Le Prince used was a single lens camera that he made and then patented. When you look at it, there are two lenses on it. The bottom lens is the lens used for shooting the film, known as the taking lens. The upper lens is the viewfinder lens. Louis Le Prince mysteriously disappeared just before unveiling his new technology to the public. His son, Adolphe, who was in the short film, was shot dead around 2 years after he testified about his father's inventions in a court case against Thomas Edison, because Edison was trying to take credit for the invention of the single-lens camera. So that's the first silent film that we know of and have evidence of, but it's very short, not something you'd go pay to see in a theater. And at the time, you couldn't really see it anyway. Thomas Edison was inspired by Le Prince and Edward Muybridge and created the kinetograph along with fellow inventor W.K.L. Dixon in 1889. Actually, based on my findings, it appears that it was Dixon who did most of the work. It used celluloid film invented by George Eastman. The two inventors used parts from a clock that would allow them to regulate the speed at which they shot film via a system of sprockets. It had a frame rate roughly 30 frames per second and could shoot 50 feet of film, which would get you about 30 seconds of footage at that time. Edison wasn't really interested in moving pictures as entertainment on their own. He really wanted to use the kinetograph to provide moving pictures to accompany his popular phonograph. But his efforts to synchronize the two machines was unsuccessful. Ever the entrepreneur, Edison felt it would be more profitable for people to view his movies individually rather than projecting them to a large audience. Thus, the kinetoscope was created. It allowed individuals to watch short films one person at a time. Kinetoscope parlors popped up in 1894 where people would pay 25 cents to view these short films. This was the first time people were able to actually watch silent films. But as is the case with many big inventions, around the same time the kinetograph was being worked on, two French brothers were developing their own film camera. Auguste Lumière and Louis Lumière invented the cinematograph in 1895. Their machine was pretty similar to Edison's kinetograph. But the big difference between the two machines was that along with the ability to record images, the cinematograph could also print and project the film. Their camera was powered by a hand crank and was lighter in weight than the kinetograph. So the brothers could take it to location and film short documentaries involving scenes from everyday life. They called these actualises. The brothers intended for their films to be projected in front of an audience. So on December 28, 1895, they gave an exhibition of their actualises at the Grand Café on the Boulevard des Capucines in Paris, charging 1 franc admission. This was the first commercial exhibition of films projected for an audience, and it was very successful and grew in popularity. Edison saw the success the Lumière brothers were having. He worked with Charles Francis Jenkins and Thomas Armat to manufacture a projector called the Vitascope in 1896. From here, projected movies really start to take off. Just 2 years after the Vitascope was first demonstrated, the technology was being nationally adopted. The first silent films of the 1890s were of real-life scenarios, usually in short format. It's stuff that we'd consider pretty boring by today's standards, but back then, this was groundbreaking stuff. All kinds of people start making their own short silent films, and it didn't take long for people to start creating narrative works. Soon, music accompaniment was added, sometimes with a full orchestra. From here, it gets pretty muddy in terms of the first fictional narrative silent movie. Once the technology gets into the hands of creative people, all kinds of little short films start getting made. It's actually pretty impressive how fast the technology started getting used. The height of the silent film era was from the early 1910s to the late 1920s and was full of artistic innovation. Silent filmmakers were so prolific in their work that virtually every style of filmmaking has its artistic roots in the silent era. This era is where technical aspects of filmmaking are refined, such as three-point lighting, the close-up, the long shot, panning, and continuity editing, just to name a few. The sad part is many people look at the silent era and have a misconception that the films are primitive and barely watchable by modern standards. Truth is, most people are just unfamiliar with the medium, and honestly, back in the day, people were careless when it came to preserving the films. This led to deterioration. Well-preserved films are often played back at the wrong speed or have missing frames and scenes, giving the appearance of poor editing. I consider the silent film era the adolescence of the film industry. There were a lot of people trying to figure out this new medium very quickly and trying to capitalize on it to the best of their ability. There was no standard when it came to film speed. People were kind of figuring things out as they went along. There was not a real standard on film length either. Some movies were real short. Some were up to 3 hours long. If you haven't checked out any silent films, it really is worth giving them a look, especially films like Metropolis or Ben-Hur. It's pretty stunning the ingenuity people had at the time to create some amazing films given the technological limits they had at the time. If you like what I'm doing, please subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. Thanks for watching.